think I'm gonna talk about cutscenes today. So, just like any other subject, you will often encounter extreme opinions from opposite sides, and it's never good to dismiss any opinions outright, and extreme positions are often just exaggeration of actually reasonable arguments. So let's start by taking a look at those. On one hand, you have stalwart defenders of cutscenes. The people who think cutscenes are the pinnacle of storytelling in video games. Probably the only reasonable means of storytelling in video games. For them, the more cutscenes, the better. On the other hand, you have people who just can't stand cutscenes. They believe it goes against everything that makes a video game, which is to say an interactive medium. And if it were up to them, there would be no cutscenes. Okay, so we are going to take a more nuanced position in all of this, and we're going to start by toning down these arguments and seeing what they have to offer. What are some good points from this side of the discussion? There is the language of cinematography that has been perfected over a long period of time in cinema, and it's very appealing to use, and it can be very effective, and cutscenes are the way for applying this language to video games without letting it interfere with gameplay. Cutscenes are also particularly well suited for conveying deep personal emotions. So it's just a powerful tool altogether. And what are some good arguments from this side of the discussion? Well, it usually creates a disconnect between gameplay and narrative, which is not good. And cutscenes fail to capitalize on the biggest strength of this medium, which is interactivity. You know, video games are not movies. You shouldn't try to make them as such. I think we should go into a little bit more detail about this last part, because we see it a lot, mostly on cutscene heavy games. So every medium has its own language, its own set of tools, its own strengths and weaknesses. They share a few tools, and some are better suited for a particular medium. You know, you don't write books like you shoot movies, and you shouldn't shoot movies like you make video games. You could say that for books you convey, you don't tell. For movies you show, you don't tell. And for games you play, you don't show. This is important because unless you can go through that process, your medium will not evolve. If movie directors insisted in shooting movies to convey their stories in the same manner that books are written, movies would definitely not be as good as they are today, and we should carry that into video games as well. A good example of cutscenes being put to good use is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, at least in my opinion. And a bad example would be Final Fantasy X. That was, yeah. And just to be clear, the idea isn't to subtract from the general tool set of storytelling. It's to replace some of these tools for better ones, for tools that are more suited for an interactive medium such as video games, and that allow both the developers and the players to experience narrative in a way that can only be achieved through video games. A few examples of how that can be achieved. Well, the first one is easy, right? This is a Soulsborne channel, and two examples that stand out from software games would be obviously item descriptions and environmental storytelling. Item descriptions, they're basically, okay, I don't want this to sound bad, but they're glorified collectibles, right? What do I mean by that? I mean it in the sense that they are the equivalent of collectibles in other games, but with a Dark Souls twist to them. In other games, they're not exactly part of the narrative. They do a little bit to improve world building, but you're supposed to read into them apart from the narrative, apart from the main plot of the story. And in Dark Souls, they are the narrative. You cannot have the story of Dark Souls without going through the item descriptions. So yeah, it's a basic tool, collectibles, but put to use in a creative way that takes narrative into consideration. And there's also environmental storytelling, which is using the general level design with the purpose of storytelling. In pretty much every single other game out there, most of them, level design is meant to be either pretty or functional. Ideally both, sometimes neither. But Dark Souls and a few other ones, they show that this very pervasive, very crucial aspect of game design can also be used for storytelling, that it can be integrated with the narrative. Other examples, we could talk about gameplay as narrative, in which the very act of playing the game serves to further the story. It serves to build your perception of the character, of the protagonist. Okay, a few good games that do that in an interesting way. We could cite the Stanley Parable. I think I've mentioned it before, and in that game, it's a walking simulator. You don't have many mechanics at your disposal, but every single mechanic is integrated with the narrative. Everything you do and everything you don't do is integrated with the narrative, and the world responds accordingly. You have also This War of Mine, very, very good game, and the gameplay is also basic. That's going to be a very common feature in this very short list. These are mostly basic games, and that's because this is actually hard. So I'm not going to go down hard on games that don't do it. I just think they should be trying whenever possible, and that we should be expecting it. So yeah, back to this war of mine. While playing that game, your actions are very deeply interwoven with the narrative. If you haven't played that game, if you don't know it, it's the story about a group of survivors, civilian survivors, in a war zone. And they have to do whatever they can to survive. That sometimes includes violence for self-defense and otherwise looting from other survivors. And whenever you encounter these situations, it's always a tough choice. I remember the first time I played it, I stopped playing. My wife recommended that game to me, and she told me about this one particular part. She knew it would be hard for me. Basic spoilers now. If you don't want them, just skip a little bit ahead. You go into a house and there's a couple of people living there. That happens sometimes, and you can try and loot things from the place. You can try to use stealth, or you can just use physical confrontation. And in this particular house there are many items to be looted, and the people living there, they are elderly, old people. It's an old couple. One of them can't even walk, and you don't even have to stealth. They won't fight you. They can't. They're old. And maybe your party is down on supplies. Some of them might be sick. You might need the medicine, and you have to choose what are those characters going to do. Are they going to take the medicine from this old couple in order to survive? Maybe you have children, maybe you have elderly of your own. Knowing that you're probably killing this old couple. This helpless old couple trying to survive a fucking war zone. So yeah, there's that. And one last example. I haven't played it yet, but I really want to. It's called Papers, Please. I've read about it. It sounds very interesting. I haven't played it yet, so I'll just drop the name and move on. Okay, Papers, Please. If you have played it, just let me know what you think about it. And since we're talking about cutscenes, one thing that I find interesting is also interactive cutscenes. They're like the evolution of QuickTime events, I guess, but it's a good evolution. It's action at your fingertips. The two games that brought this to my attention at first were the Uncharted games and the new Tomb Raider Trilogy. So you have these action set pieces. They're very cinematic. They are framed as cutscenes, but they're all interactive. And it's not a quick time event. You don't have the action playing on the background and then you have to press a button at the right moment when the prompt shows. No, you're actually playing through the cutscene, you know. And this is a very interesting example because, okay, it contrasts greatly with, let's say, I've recently played the beginning of the new Metro game, Metro Exodus, and right at the beginning you have this cutscene where you're blowing up a train. You're in your own train, and then you hop on the enemy's train and you blow it up from the inside, and you have to jump back to your own train. It was a good set piece, but it wasn't interactive at all. And also Darksiders 3, I don't want to shit on it, I've talked about it before, but sorry. One thing that bugged me greatly about that game was that every single time you killed a boss, the game would cut to a cutscene, and then the boss would be defeated in the cutscene. I have just beaten the boss. Let me beat the goddamn boss, you know? You don't have to do it for me. I did it already. And yeah. So this interactive cutscene example is an interesting one because it also takes in consideration the setting in which cutscenes are used. You have to be mindful of what is this experience meant to evoke on the player. You know, some games are more contemplative, all games have a different pace to them. XCOM's narrative, XCOM's story is action based. It's a combat game. You're fighting aliens on the streets, but the pacing is not the same as a shooter, for instance. So it's not an action experience. That's not the feeling that you evoke on the player as they are playing the game. But on a shooter or an action RPG like Darksiders, it's straight up action. You're running and gunning. So why would you have the action playing on a cutscene when you can have me playing through the action? It doesn't make sense, but Uncharted does it very well. It's very effective. I like it. Okay, so we've analyzed quite a few examples, and I think that the basic thing to be taken away from it is that cutscenes are good. They just need to be used properly. You know, like I said in the beginning, they're very well suited for conveying emotions, for instance, which is why I mentioned Hellblade as a game that puts cutscenes to good use. The emotions that are conveyed through the cutscenes of that game could not be conveyed in any other way. They needed those cutscenes. And they did a very good job at it. They're great. But if we want to evolve our medium beyond its current limitations, we should be striving to find better ways to tell our stories. We should be striving to integrate gameplay, and not just gameplay, every single other aspect of game design into the narrative. And it's not just for narrative-driven games, as you might call them. It's for any game. I've said it before, all games have a narrative, and all games would benefit from going through this process, regardless of genre or depth or anything like that. And I think the first step to start changing our collective mentality about this subject would probably be to realize that this is a symptom. It's not the problem itself, it's a symptom. The problem is we seem to be living inside a historical context frozen in time. A long time ago, game developers had to deal with extreme technical limitations and they had to get creative. So they were always looking for new ways to tell their stories. Then, all of a sudden, we had a boom. Suddenly you have 3D graphics, CDs, and cutscenes become very, very prevalent. At that moment, they weren't trying to find new methods of storytelling anymore. They weren't trying to create wholly new mechanics. They were just trying to catch up with technology. Technology basically made games bigger and better looking. A lot better. Real fast. So it's natural that they would focus on this aspect during that time, but we seem to kind of be stuck on it up until today. We seem to always be expecting our games to be exactly bigger and better looking. As long as they give us that, we mostly seem content with it. We don't expect and we don't demand true innovation from them. And I get it, that it's difficult. True innovation is rare. It's really difficult. That's why the games that can actually do it stand out from the crowd so easily. But many games, many studios, they don't even seem to be trying, and we generally seem to be okay with that. But it's not okay. They already have a lot of tools at their disposal. We've listed a few of them. They should be using them more oftenly, and they should at least be trying to move in that direction. And as always, the first step is for us, gamers, the audience, to change our perception of the subject. Otherwise, why would they change anything? Right? Okay, so that's my opinion on the subject, and as I often say it, we're here to learn together, so what's your opinion? Okay, I would like to know it. So leave a comment if you'd like. I'll definitely read through it. And yeah, thanks for stopping by and see you around.